Day 186 of the Ukrainian War Map, also known as the Russo-Ukrainian War. Jozzy here, and today is another quick update as I take a simplified and down-to-earth approach to the happenings on the ground in Ukraine. Now, as always, I like to start off with some of these Russian personnel and military hardware losses. Now, these are just estimates as we take a look at the hampered, depleted, exhausted Russian forces there. I'm unable to compare these figures with Russia's version of events because they've chosen not to release any details in about 5 months, when they last said on March the 25th of 2022 that they reached a figure of 5,000 out of action Russian military personnel, which analysts suggest is probably even just a quarter of the actual numbers back then. But having a look here, we'll have a look at the killed or the lost Russian personnel losses there, and that's 46,750. And we'll move down to some of the hardware and the armored combat vehicles, an additional 3 in the last 24-hour reporting period. On the tank side of things, an additional 3, and artillery an additional 5. So quite an ongoing steady accumulation of losses on the Russian side there, to say the least. Now we'll move across to the map, and as we sometimes do, we'll take a look at outside of Ukraine to begin with, in the Rostov Oblast in Russia, where there has been multiple reports of movement of a great deal of Russian military equipment via the Rostov Oblast Railway. Plenty of Russian civilians are just taking photos of this. And due to all of this information, I'm actually half expecting now some Ukrainian partisans taking out the Russian supply lines within this Russian territory area. And it wouldn't be the first time either. So we'll move across to Sumy, where the Sumy governor advised Russia fired a whopping 220 plus projectiles at the greater Sumy Oblast there. Locations such as residential locations, a school, a kindergarten, and a post office were destroyed. And I'm willing to bet there were no Ukrainian howitzer cannons inside that kindergarten. Luckily, schools are out at the moment, so no students were hurt. We'll move across to Kharkiv. There was some overnight attacks in Kharkiv here, and resulting in the following photography. Ukrainians also have a pretty clear idea of what munitions are used to do these sorts of things these days as well. In this instance, they confirmed this one was from a Russian Uragan rocket fire, which is a 1970s Soviet-era multiple rocket launcher that has a relatively low accuracy and an effective firing range of about 20 to 40 miles, which Ukraine actually has a number of these as well at their disposal. Now, one rocket which hit Kharkiv's historical district, leaving quite a large crater hole in the road. A local police officer in the area said there are no military objects, no military equipment, only residential buildings with regular citizens near the place of impact. Now we'll move across down to the Donbass, the ever-contested Donbass region here. Generally in the Donbass, Russia has had some unreasonably costly battles in the recent months, exhausting their resources, which is speculated as being the reason for why Russia finds it hard to secure any significant gains at this location in recent times. However, the Ukrainian-held Donetsk Oblast area has ongoing civilian evacuations, effectively turning the evacuees here into war refugees, and they're either internally or externally displaced. That is to say, they have to move to West Ukraine or even outside of the country altogether to be safe. We'll move across to Sloviansk, a city here, which has certainly been taking a bit of a hammering in the last 24 hours. It's not strictly speaking the front lines, as there are some of the villages here, but it is a larger city and certainly no stranger to Russian flinging of shells at that location. However, we'll move across to right there, so Brazkivka. The Ukrainian forces actually pushed the Russian incursion back here. So if we go forward and backward in time, you can see some liberated territory, recently liberated territory. So that's always good to see. We'll move across to Zaporizhia. We've got this photo here of fires that occurred overnight after some Russian shelling, but I don't have much more information on that one. Then we'll move a little bit further to the left in Kherson, or the Kherson Oblast, just the very top northeastern corner, where a Russian Kh-59 missile hit right there. So Novovo-Rontsovka. Now these Kh-59 Russian missiles are really another Soviet-era produced missile, and not a modern-day Russian missile, which seems to be lacking in Russian supply. This tree wasn't too happy though, obviously. Maybe there's something special about this tree that the Russian forces just didn't like. Also, there were some explosions reported in Russian-occupied Kherson City's industrial area, which is just a little bit northwest of the city, about right there. Most reports stated that the Z forces set up their base near a prison. At least they didn't set it up at a nuclear power plant this time, but there really wasn't one to set it up nearby anyways. Now we'll move across to some news. So a car of a Russian official was set on fire in Moscow. So all the way up there, obviously in the Russian Federation itself. According to Russian state media, the act the act was perpetrated by a woman who opposed Russia's invasion of Ukraine. She's been since detained, and we're probably not going to hear a great deal out of her in the upcoming, close future there. In some more news, according to Ukraine's MOD, so their Ministry of Defense Intelligence, the Russian government ordered to keep explosions at military facilities in Crimea a secret. This approach is designed to stop Russian citizens from fleeing Crimea back to Russia. After all of the explosions there, probably 5 or 6 explosions at least in the last 2 or 3 weeks, as really part of the Ukrainian counteroffensive. However, I'm pretty sure word's already got out, as we have countless footage of people in traffic jams trying to get over the Crimean Bridge back to Russian territory already. And in some further news, now take this next one with a bit of a grain of salt if you want to, but Ukrainian intelligence suggests Russia has no more than 45% of its missiles left. The MOD also said Russia has a difficult situation with its Kalibr missiles and has about 20% or less of its Iskander ballistic missiles. Now, this suggested depletion of Russian missile inventories does seem fairly accurate to me. Of course, it was just yesterday when I mentioned how a Kh-22 anti-ship missile built in 1962 was fired by Russia to try to hit a land target in Zaporizhia. So in other words, we really are dealing with a war of attrition from a military personnel and a military hardware perspective. Mostly Russian supply issues too, if I am to be more specific about that. Now, in some further news, we have, regarding Kazakhstan, a neighbor and ally of Russia, has suspended all arms exports to Russia for a year. They've said just a full year, said Kazakhstan's government, amid the conflict in Ukraine and Western sanctions against Russia. So they don't want to be sort of eked out of the international market and have sanctions on them as well, economic ones. And you know what? Kazakhstan actually produces a wide range of military equipment, including boats, armored vehicles, machine guns, night visors, which are pretty important for Russian soldiers, of which apparently they don't have many or any of them, torpedoes, and protective gear too. And just lastly, we'll round it off with a bit of a funny as always. So this is a video of a Ukrainian soldier locating remains cleared from a Russian encampment, displaying the quality of a Russian soldier's helmet left behind. Now, it's pretty extensively documented at this point, the scale of corruption and how Russian military equipment procurement contractors work. So, whereby they steal or misappropriate, aka embezzle, funds or money that was designed for new troop equipment. In many instances, they make cheap knockoffs and pocket the difference, or they pull out old Soviet-era equipment and say they fulfilled their contract, then pocket more of the difference, if not all of it, and likely to spend it on any of the countless Russian super yachts that exist in the seas today. And I thought I'd look up the price of these things. They're not actually measured in the hundreds of millions of US dollars. These days, super yachts are measured in the billions of dollars. Most expensive one of which is 4.8 billion. So quite a price tag to those things there. And like I say, this is pretty well documented. I should show you guys a new misappropriation of funds every single day of the week, like this Russian foxhole where they found food rations 7 years expired. This is just a photo, but there's a whole video associated with this one. It's pretty funny and pretty shameful and pretty upsetting in many ways too. Okay, so that's about it for today, guys. A little bit shorter. Thanks for watching. Please leave a comment, subscribe, hit that like button, show all of those trolls in the comment section your prevailing sentiment, as I say, in support and solidarity towards support for the Ukrainian people and the country. And yeah, I do hope to see all of you guys there in the next one. Cheers.